screaming at the screen because I was like, girl, grow a spine, you jellyfish.
Yeah.
Ah!
Hi, I'm your monster.
And I'm Gabe. And we're the Monsters Next Door.
Monsters Next Door. See, you should have told me ahead of time. I would have gotten it.
That's okay.
I'm over here like an idiot in the Ghouls Next Door.
Oh, look at unmasked to be.
Look at this guy. Yeah.
He's angry. Yeah. We're the Ghouls Next Door, which is a type of monster. When we are the media literacy show from a horror lens, we explore the real life, historical, psychological, emotional influences behind our cinematic fears. In continuing our Monstrous Love series, we are talking about another film from 2024. What a year for horror films. Hits and misses, for sure. But we're talking about Your Monster.
Yeah. It was very cute. I liked it. That's my spoiler crew.
Yeah, I liked it too.
Yeah.
I didn't know at all what to expect, and that was really nice, like going into it pretty blind about that, or just not knowing. And I think it really helped kind of put myself in there and just deal with it. But I think even if you did know, you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I agree. It was just like a fun ride where it was like emotional and sad and also like satisfying. I liked it. Good vibes.
Yeah. I got it immediately. It's not a subtle film, and as soon as I was like, oh, okay. Got it. Which I think is real, like, this is different than the other like Monstrous Love episodes that we've done, because although there is a monster that she falls in love with, he's not real. And he very obviously represents herself, and so I think that is really refreshing, whereas like in other times, like the creature represents like the other, or just like, you know, this idea, and it's not so like obviously about the person and their journey in that way.
Yeah, it's more of a loving yourself time, but with this like physical version of what you could perceive as a monster. But yeah, no, I thought it was really creative in that way. I appreciated the difference. I think it was a good choice, Gabe. Essentially, producer of the year.
Thank you. Yeah, it's seeing the trailer for Your Monster is one of the reasons I decided to do the Monstrous Love series. Was I saw it and I was like, well, I want to watch it. I was like, I'll watch anything. I was like, I'll watch anything that Melissa's in, and she's, you know, all hits for her, and so, you know, I was excited for that. And then it just, it wasn't anything I expected. It was very emotional. I felt really infuriated watching it, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
I felt like my monster wanted to come out while I was watching it. I was like, I'm being triggered right now. I'm so mad at her. And like from like a place where like I've definitely been there. Yeah. You know, and I know people who've been there. I know people who do those things, and I'm like, you want to shake them. You want to be like, just why are you doing that? But at the same time, you absolutely can understand that as like a trauma response, or just like how you keep people pacified and safe and comfortable by, you know, pushing yourself down. So it's a very obvious metaphor, but a very fun mask that they put on it, and that it's also a great just blending of genres. Yeah.
As a recovering people pleaser / fawner, I guess, is because that's mostly what I want to talk about. It was very accurate, and as you said, enraging, because you're like, no, but also I can't be mad at you. I definitely did that before. Ow.
Yeah, I can understand and still be mad.
Yeah, exactly.
I can still want better for you. And that's really like what I hope this film inspires in you. I think it was really charming as well. Like, it's cute, and it knows that it's being like tongue-in-cheek, like obvious in all of its aspects, and that's makes it even more enjoyable. So I really highly recommend this film. And, you know, I don't know if we're, because it is so obvious, I don't know how much of what we say is going to be like so world changing for you. But I hope that you get out of it similar ideas that we did, and come away enjoying it for like its inspiration. We all, like, with horror, the answer is always like just murder him. just someone's mean, murder him. That's, again, we're not condoning that. I'm not saying do that. But murder that relationship, sure.
Yeah.
Put that relationship to rest.
Oh, it's like the only reason I'm like, don't do that, is because the consequence, more than like, oh, did they deserve that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He sucked. He was the worst. But like, I don't want her to go to jail.
Yeah.
So like, at that point, it's like, he wasn't worth you spending your life in prison.
Yeah, I agree. Like, and we'll talk about that.
He was a small little man.
Yeah, and just like, as always, spoiler alerts, but yeah, just like,
oh, oops, yeah,
it's no, it's okay. I mean, I started saying it. But yeah, I think that it's not the answer. Think about what the repercussions of actions could be.
Yeah.
And I agree. I don't think it was worth it. I think he was already going to get his due diligence. Like, his comeuppance was occurring. Mm-hmm. So she got to heal the world differently.
And that's what I'll talk about in my section.
Excellent. Before I hop into my section, I just wanted to say, if you are listening, make sure you check out the visuals for this episode. Kat went all out as the beast, or the monster, which looks just much like the beast. It's spot on. It's insane.
I was in the movie. What do you mean?
I would fall in love with you, dude.
Aw, same.
Well, you could change the thermostat, whatever.
We're not gonna fight over it. We're just gonna immediately skip steps because we've healed. Look at that.
Yeah. Also, we both would probably want it to be warm.
Yes.
So,
super valid point. Yeah.
And I'm her Bride of Frankenstein costume.
Yeah, the hair,
because I've just always wanted to be Bride of Frankenstein.
It's beautiful. So. You really did it up.
Thanks. But why don't we hop in and let me tell you about your monster, and you tell me in the comments when you subscribe that you liked it or you didn't. Yeah. What you got from it, what I may be missing. So your monster is from 2024, last year, and it's about: after her life falls apart, soft-spoken actress Laura Franco finds her voice again when she meets a terrifying, yet weirdly charming monster living in her closet. It's a romantic comedy horror film about falling in love with your inner rage, and it's directed and written by Caroline Linden. So just like that synopsis, Your Monster is a film that crosses genres, blending romantic comedy, horror, and drama to explore the toll of keeping our emotions locked in a closet. And the story follows Laura Franco, who is a talented young actress who's facing a tough diagnosis: cancer. And to make matters worse, her boyfriend, Jacob, decides to call it quits while she's in the hospital for, again, cancer.
Yep.
Okay? And he's just like, you need more help, and I can't do that. I'm going to be responsible for you. I'm leaving.
Isaiah was just like... wow, I hate him. I hope something horrible happens to him, is what he said when we were watching. I was like, yeah, same.
And I mean, like, it is like it's a comedy, so the way that it is like so absurd it's silly, but it's
very over the top. Yeah,
far from what happens to people, but yeah. Mm-hmm. So then, after surgery and feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges, Laura retreats to her childhood home, hoping for a bit of peace and maybe some clarity, but instead of finding comfort in her old space, she discovers a bizarre and terrifying presence: a monster. The monster, which is trapped in Laura's closet, is oddly endearing and strangely relatable, and he explains, like, when they meet, the other moments in Laura's life when she'd summon him, because clearly Laura has been struggling against this neglect and pain for her whole life. Like, he describes 3 distinct situations in which she brought him about, and it's very clear, and like, as we see later, like, what he helped her with, it's like, oh, okay. These were moments when she couldn't keep that bottled in. And so we find that she's skillfully tampered down on her rightful outrage and becomes a convenient, quiet doormat for those in her life. Her mother is absent, despite Laura just undergoing cancer surgery.
Yep.
Her baby. And she's just not there. Like, we don't even see this lady. We don't even get, she leaves food.
Yeah. It's a really testament to the neglect.
In her house. Crazy. Yep. Her only friend pops in and out, always distracted by something more important. She's like, I gotta do karate. And I'm like, what is this obsession with karate over the health care of your best friend?
Yeah.
Or your friends?
Best questionable. Yeah.
Friends, also questionable.
Yeah.
And even her ex-boyfriend, who abandoned her in the hospital, is moving forward with his musical featuring a character he created for Laura, except now Laura isn't the star. The character's name is literally Laurie. Just change the last letter.
He's so creative.
Oh my god. And so as Laura grapples with the physical and emotional toll of her illness and her fractured relationships, she develops an unexpected, intense bond with Monster. And the more time she spends with him, the more she realizes it's not just a figment of her imagination, but a very clear representation of her deepest fears, her unresolved rage, and her struggles to come to terms with her own identity and power. Because your Monster is a tale as old as time, mirroring the storyline of Beauty and the Beast. The monster even looks very much like Beast. Only Laura isn't Stockholm syndromed into falling in love with an out-of-touch prince who in turn learns to treat the help as people and not objects.
Whoa.
It's not about him. He doesn't have growth. He's a tool. Right? Instead, Laura, in growing her relationship with Monster, learns to accept and make room for the darker parts of her. And she spent so much of her life shoving parts of her down in the closet to placate others that it's literally killing her. And I'm not saying like that's what the cancer is, but like the lack of support and like care is only going to harm the fact that she has cancer more, right? Yeah, she's not going to advocate for herself.
Yeah, scientifically it actually does.
Yeah, but I'm just saying like I'm not saying that's what her cancer is from. I'm saying it doesn't happen.
Yeah. That's funny. I said the same thing like later, so it's really funny that we're both like, it didn't do it, but like it did.
But also it did do it.
Made it bad.
So as your monster progresses, the film, well, your monster, I don't know what your monster is doing. But as the film Your Monster progresses, it skillfully blends elements of horror and humor to explore deeper psychological themes. It's a perfect blend of laugh-out-loud moments and genuinely heart-wrenching scenes, effectively using these shifts to mirror the internal conflict of Laura. Like I said, screaming at the screen, because I was like, girl, grow a spine, you jellyfish.
Yeah.
And so as she's grappling with her own trauma, the film emphasizes not just the literal monster in her closet, but the figurative monsters she's been suppressing within herself. And this relationship with Monster is Laura's self-reflection, pushing her toward emotional healing and self-empowerment. And as Kat and I said in the beginning, it does lead to her making some rash, aggressive decisions, which happen when you've bottled everything up and you haven't had like a controlled burn situation where you are releasing those in a very natural and cared for way. So then you end up exploding and causing really irreparable, life-altering damage that could have been avoided. Like maybe we just don't do the musical, we do something else.
Yeah.
But
maybe make a better musical, because like you could have told the story better than he ever could. Yeah, even Monster was like, this is like, if Monster is her, Monster like roasts this thing. He's like, this is pathetic. It's not even a good story. It's not good writing. It's not like anything that's good about it was you in the first place. Yeah. But her not being able to carve a space out for herself in that world is also like, it's both indicative of like her behavior and like how she closes herself down, but also like is a very competitive world that's not going to let girls like her do it. Yeah. Again, as someone who's been denied job opportunities because I'm too nice by men in the industry, I get it. I get it. No. Would I murder someone on stage? No. No, I wouldn't do it if I'm not really mad. Got better. I'm in therapy. Yeah. Anyway, in the
the musical. So it's also part musical, this film, because she does have her musical number, which is like really fun and brilliant. And it's something you're amped at, like, because you hear pieces of it, you see it being rehearsed. And so when we finally get her last act, you're really waiting for her version of that song and for her to bring it to life. And that scene kicks off where a character in the musical is just like, that's what's wrong with girls like you. And then she's like, what's wrong with girls like me? So this is essentially what my part of our episode is going to be about, because it is an exciting time to be a femme Latine horror lover, with actors like Jenna Ortega and Melissa Barrera taking on empowering and distinctive roles as final girls. And Barrera has been thriving in this horror genre, surviving Ballerina Vampire Assaults in Abigail, which is also released in 2024. And having had led the new era in the Scream franchise along Ortega as the final sisters. TBD, what's going on? Because rest in peace, Scream franchise. Good to me. In his name, like, why would you? Anyway, that's for a different day. But she had done like a decent job there, and it's clear like she has been carving out a space as one of those like final girls. And I've discussed in previous episodes the deep love Latina communities have for horror and how we make up a significant portion of the horror audience. So it's been refreshing to see that representation not only on screen but behind the camera as well. Like, shout out to Fede Alvarez when we just did Alien Romulus. So they're out there, you know? And I think it's also super important that she is Laura. And even if it was like, just like, it absolutely could be that she was hired because she's a brilliant actor. Yeah. And the intent was not to have any commentary on the fact that she is a Latina woman, that she is a Mexican actress. Could be completely not the intent. However, by casting her and having her lead it, it also added that extra piece, and then other representations that are happening on screen also contribute to that. So in an article on Refinery 29, Melissa Barrera's Your Monster emboldened me to embrace my feminine rage. Writer Sofia Aguilar shares, there are a few great female horror villains like Mrs. Voorhees, Carrie, and Jennifer of Jennifer's Body fame, but rarely are they Latinas, despite the fact that we arguably have more reason to be angry and rageful. We faced and been forced to survive generational trauma, state violence, microaggressions, and cultures of abuse, just to name a few. Yet, Latinas and other racially or ethnically marginalized women are relegated to side characters that die off well before the credits roll, which I think is why having her at like the front of the Scream franchise after just like white women for a long time or just killing off black ladies, and also like Jenna Ortega being like the lead of a lot of horror as well, is so important. And I think having Barrera as our star in this film, we get to see the notorious Latina anger bubble up to the surface. As a Latin femme presenting person, much of my life, the Latina anger has been like a threat or like a reference. And I was like, if anything, my anger is from my Scorpio. Like my treatment of it is probably my zodiac sign, and also trauma. But I oftentimes, like, even my mother will just be like, just let the Latina out. Like, girl, what do you mean? You know? What does that mean? So I think that this idea of Latina anger is a fury that's been festering to the point of affecting our own well-being, all because society and culture have taught us we don't have permission to express it, because when we do, we become that trope. Or just another angry brown person, right? And so Laura's identity as a punching bag doormat isn't exclusive to Latina women. Okay, it's something many femmes and women experience overall. So it is not that I don't think was its express intent. I think it's just elevated. So from a young age, we're taught, like as women and femme folk, to minimize ourselves, to take up as little space as possible with our bodies, minds, and words in order to accommodate others. Like literally sitting with your legs crossed versus man spreading, you know, having to have a coworker say the same thing you just said out loud so that people now think it's a good idea, right? Like, these are cliches we've heard before, but it's literally like what you're ingrained to do. You're soft-spoken. Women are seen, not heard. And so it's a constant argument that I have had with many of my fellow and women friends to not be kind. I was like, don't be kind. No one, like, be kind for sure, but like in instances where someone is unkind to you, do not feel like you need to be kind. To assert themselves and their needs. And so Laura's silence and placating is a distinctly feminine curse. And so, like, I do want to say that, like, this is definitely, I think the intent of Caroline Lindy was, it's hard for women out here because it's somewhat based on a true story. Like, I'm sure this is like her lived experience. However, having it be Melissa as our lead, and then having the presence of two white women as antagonists in Laura's story is significant. So Jackie, who is the talented actress, she immediately secures the role of Lori, a role that was literally meant for Laura once she shows up. And the casting department makes no effort to hide this, letting it be known that the other auditions were just for show. They're like, we'll do that, but don't worry, hun. Right? And Jackie does reveal herself to be a true girl's girl, opening up to Laura about her own struggles as a woman who, despite her perceived power, was abused and taken advantage of. So I do, like, appreciate that kind of twist that's happening, but she is, for all intents and purposes, the antagonist besides him in the film. Because we see her, we don't know that. She doesn't know that. She doesn't even know she's the antagonist. And then Laura's only friend, Maisie, didn't even have to audition. She was given a role because of her connections, and we find out other things. But she's also terribly performative, where, like, in her friendship, like, she picks up Laura from the hospital because that's what friends do, but then she quickly departs despite her friend being in great need and still recovering. Like, her friend is, like, breaking down at the table, and she's like, gotta go to karate.
She just, like, hits on the doctor instead of, like, saying anything to her when she gets there. She's just like, oh, who are you? She's like, I'm married. And she's like, ugh, okay, fine, we'll leave.
She's supposed to be, like, quirky friends, which, you know, I will say, like the Refinery 29 article is saying, like, in other horror films, like, Melissa would be relegated to that role of just shitty, quirky friend. So thankfully, it's the tables have turned. But much of the real horrors of the film, how Laura is treated by others, are relatable. Her suffering does not exist in a bubble, even if she's silent about it. I even mentioned to Kat while we were watching the film that statistically, men are more likely to divorce their wives when they become ill. Okay. Of course, this doesn't apply to everyone, and women have been known to leave their husbands too. Like, I was even thinking of the film 50-50 with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and how, I think it was Bryce Dallas Howard. Oh, that's fun. 3 named people. Leaves him. She's like, I can't pick you up from your cancer treatment, you know? But statistically, it's simply more likely to happen to a woman. And he was even brought up in Love is Blind recent season. All this to say, separating the supernatural and horror elements of the film, this scenario is incredibly relatable and believable, and there are women out there who are experiencing it in some form. So the metaphor of the monster representing Laura's emotions is both obvious and brilliant. By framing the story as a romantic comedy, we witness Laura's playful comedic growth as she learns to fall for the monster, and ultimately for herself. So at first, she allows the monster to have free reign, which is crazy. This is not her, like, this is her house. And she's like, yeah, I guess. Oh, you make sense. You live here. Like, you're louder than me. But as she begins to assert herself in these little ways, right? So, like, adjusting the thermostat to something more comfortable for herself, or playing her own song on the piano, like, on repeat, even when he's like, I hate this. That's my favorite scene. Like, I do not like this happening. But by doing those things, and it is a playful, just like kind of enemies to lovers scenario, but it's like enemy of yourself to lover of yourself. And so we see her confidence grow. And that's like really cute. And the monster pushes her to voice the injustices she's facing, eventually leading to a violent outburst at one of the sources of her rage, her ex. Mm-hmm. And in the film's haunting final scene, the lines between reality and imagination blur. Jacob confronts her angrily, accusing her of ruining his show, his reputation, and everything else. But Laura's response is silent yet powerful, leaving Jacob as a lifeless set piece for her long-awaited musical number. And in a world where white male rage is often loud and center stage, it's refreshing to see Laura's rage come through quietly yet triumphantly, leaving both the characters in the film and the audience in stunned belief. It was like, is this real? What's real? What happened? What's going on?
Is this a part of the play?
I'm like, is this a part of the movie? What is real? What is fake? But I also think too, there's that trend of how men write female rage, which is like loud and just like vicious, and it's almost a replication of male rage, which is allowed to be loud. But female rage is so often quiet and venomous, right? The same way that like female serial killers aren't like stabbing people a million times. Usually it's like poison. So I think like that, like having him come in and he's just blowing up and he's just loud and he's so violent in this confrontation, and then her violence is like, it has happened. And we have to catch up to be like, what? Because she's like, what? And instead her anger is the song. Her anger is the injustice of what she experienced and saying like, you tricked me. So I think like that was really brilliant in that part. And so ultimately, your monster succeeds in weaving together emotional depth with the intensity of supernatural horror. Your monster is ultimately a story about healing, the power of confronting our fears, and realizing that sometimes the monsters we're afraid of aren't just the ones lurking in the dark. They're the ones that we carry inside of us. And it's a perfect watch for fans of unconventional storytelling and for anyone who's ever felt the weight of their unresolved emotions. And Kat is going to tell us what that weight is like. When we how to not lead to murdering someone on the stage.
It's poison.
This tacky weird musical I didn't understand.
It was also like so bold of him to be like, I'm going to tell a story about the oppression of women, me, a man who is oppressing women actively in my role as this antagonist in this movie. And I'm just like, bro,
I forget he quoted someone at the start of their rehearsal, and I was like, he is not using that.
Because he thinks he's so cool.
I was like, this white man did not just use those words. I was like,
it's saying a lot.
I get it. I get why she did what she did.
It's like so multifaceted, and like what you're saying, it's like it's very much like white mediocrity gets center stage, and then she's just like, what the heck, man? Y'all don't deserve this. Like, I'm not saying that like the one chick like wasn't talented. I mean, she seemed like she did know how to do stuff, but like she didn't earn that role at all.
She hadn't experienced that either.
Yeah, and they were so frustrated with her like the whole time too. So it's just like it's a whole thing. But very much white mediocrity, and you're just like, dude, why are you literally the worst? And I guess it's because that's the whole point.
Because he's been allowed. He's been allowed to be the worst, and he's actually been lauded for being the worst. Like, people have lifted him up as this voice of a generation. Meanwhile, anything good about that play was her.
Literally. So we hate him here. It's just fine. But what I'm going to talk about is the impacts of childhood neglect on adults. So like when you're neglected as a kid, this is what happens to you when you grow up. And your monster does an incredible job of exposing the long-term effects of childhood neglect, painting a hauntingly accurate picture of how unresolved trauma can shape a person. Like, I was watching it there, I was like, oh my god, this is like spot on. As someone who was very very much that, and also fawned and was a super big people pleaser, and I'm finally like healed out of it. But like, it is a huge, like, I was like point for point, I was like, she's just doing every single thing. So it's reminiscent of the emotional release I felt while watching Talk to Me, and that it was like a raw portrayal of loss and grief that was so accurate. I was like, this is how trauma does. This one, Your Monster, does this perfectly. We see how neglect spirals into repressed emotions and how that shapes like her entire life. Mm-hmm. So the film hints at two types of neglect in Laura's past, both physical neglect in that her parents were absent, and emotional neglect as her emotional needs were ignored. So throughout flashbacks and the subtle references to her estranged mother, Gabe mentioned like the 3 times we see where the monster had to come out. Any mention of the mom specifically, we see that there's like a total absence of nurturing in her childhood. And this lack of nurturing and connection to like her formative people, you know, in childhood influences how she interacts with the world. She becomes a people pleaser, burying her desires to avoid conflict, and fails to express her needs in both everyday life and her relationships. So this pattern of neglect follows Laura into adulthood. Her boyfriend treats her like a stepping stone of his own success, tossing her aside when she's no longer useful. Her friend does the same thing, offering just literally the bare minimum. Laura tolerates this treatment because she's never known love that didn't come with conditions. To her, expressing her needs feels like a surefire way to push people away and become too much to love. You cannot be inconvenient if you are neglected, or they'll just leave you alone forever, you know? And that's awful. But it was represented so perfectly. So the ultimate blow comes when her boyfriend leaves her, as Gabe said, while she literally has cancer. Reinforcing her fear. Like, it makes it even worse because it, like, reinforces that probably, like, long-lasting fear that, like, she's unworthy, you know? It, like, made her feel that way. Yeah. So it's like all that, like, I've thought this in my head, but now this is real because I'm literally having this experience right now. And so she doesn't even let herself feel mad about it because she's like, oh, this just confirmed how I already felt about myself.
Especially because he's like, you need like your needs. Like he's like, I can't give you your needs. And so that just like enforces that like she, like what she needs is too much. What she needs is crossing a line, and she's asking for too much by not even asking. She just expected the person she loved and spent like 6-7 years with to be there with her. So the audacity.
Yeah, he sucks. Yes. But the film doesn't stop there. It subtly explores the connection between emotional repression and physical health. So while Laura's cancer is, as I said, likely a mix of genetic and environmental factors, it's probably not just the trauma. Her unprocessed trauma plays a role. Repressed emotions keep the body in a constant state of stress, releasing cortisol, flooding your body with cortisol and wreaking havoc over time. Research has shown that trauma can increase the risk of autoimmune disorders, cancer, and other chronic illnesses. Neglect and emotional abuse can be just as damaging as physical abuse when it like manifests in the body. The difference is it's harder to identify and address because the scars often remain hidden until adulthood. You essentially can't stop it when, like, you can't mediate it sooner because you're not really seeing huge signs, especially like in femme presenting folks who are more likely to hide it. So these wounds frequently surface as behavioral issues, though not always, and are shaped by how children are socialized based on gender, race, and other factors. So essentially, like, you can't stop the neglect from happening if you can't see it and like intervene. And what makes neglect even more insidious is how deeply societal structures like capitalism exacerbate it. Many parents are forced into impossible situations, working grueling hours just to make ends meet, with no mandated maternity leave to offer a lifeline. In these cases, neglect isn't born of a lack of love, but of environmental pressures, which can be especially heartbreaking because, like, it's not like for a lack of love. It's literally like, I had to work to feed you, and that is filled with love, but I could not physically be there. Capitalism necessitates a form of neglect, unfortunately.
There's also the people who are forced to have children who don't.
That too, and who did not.
So they might not have that love because it was never their intention.
Exactly. But that's not the case for Laura. It seems like her mother just didn't care. We don't know. It's implied though that like even when she was around, she was the worst. So essentially, even when she was physically present, she was not nurturing or kind. And she basically left Laura without the emotional support she desperately needed. To understand just how infuriating and traumatizing this kind of neglected, we can look at a data statistic that I actually found on Instagram, but then like researched and found out that it is real. Laura's anger is not only justified, it's overdue. I once saw a reel that stuck with me, and it said, if your parents meet just 30% of your emotional needs as a child, you'll grow up with a secure attachment style. The bar is on the floor. So credit goes to SOS with Dr. Taylor for sharing it, though it was a stitch and I could not find the original creator. So if anyone knows what that is, definitely let us know so we can credit them appropriately. Dr. Taylor referenced also the statistic from Donald Winnicott's 1950s theory, good enough parenting, which is supported by researchers like Edward Tronick, John Bowlby, and Mary Ainsworth. The idea is simple yet powerful, that parenting is hard. Achieving 30% gives over-anxious parents room to breathe. 30% is super achievable. It reassures them that they don't have to be perfect to raise securely attached children. But Laura's story highlights the other side of this coin. Her mother didn't even meet the baseline. There was no worry about how her actions impacted Laura, no effort to provide even the most basic emotional support, because she never experienced even that 30% of what she needed. Laura grew up with expecting and accepting the bare minimum from those she loved. And this isn't just a story about neglect, it's how deeply unmet needs shape our entire view of love, relationships, and worthiness. Laura deserves so much better than what she got. It's sad. And emotional neglect in particular leaves a lasting imprint, often leading to emotional dysregulation. This can make it incredibly hard for individuals to understand, manage, or express their feelings. So it also eliminates our ability to be self-aware. Struggles with low self-esteem, difficulty forming emotional connections, and challenges with intimacy in adult relationships are all super common outcomes. But the impact doesn't stop there. Neglect in childhood significantly shapes how individuals see themselves. Adults who experience neglect can also often carry a diminished sense of self-worth, feeling unworthy or inadequate. And this can make it hard to trust others or form secure, healthy relationships. Attachment styles are also deeply affected, with many developing patterns of avoidance, fear of closeness, or difficulty establishing trust. Socially, the effects are profound. Setting boundaries, expressing needs, and seeking support can feel impossible. Instead, people who endure childhood neglect may fall into people-pleasing behaviors, constantly seeking validation to fill the emotional void that was left behind. In Your Monster, the titular monster becomes Laura's outlet for all of the emotions she's bottled up over the years. But without professional, familial, and relational support, Laura turns to the monster to finally validate her suppressed rage. It gives her the strength to call out unacceptable behaviors and demand accountability. But while the monster helps her process some of this pain, it's clear she never addresses the root cause, her relationship with her mother. You see, she's finally talking back to the friend who didn't show up for her, the guy, the ex who sucks, but we never see her mom. And she's the one who did the most damage. We don't know the story of her dad either. So it's you don't see her parents at all. And this lack of self-awareness leads to a dangerous cycle where her compounded rage spills out in destructive ways. As Gabe said, yes, her ex-boyfriend deserved every ounce of fury for his appalling behavior, but the sheer volume of anger, it's when the soda bubbles over, and the fact she literally murders him speaks to a deeper unresolved pain. Generally, you don't get to murder territory. Usually those who have been neglected or experienced trauma, they're not going to murder, they're going to be hurt by other people. And she definitely was. But because of not resolving it at all, we just see this really explosive reaction that, because it's a movie, was very satisfying. So even though Laura's rage feels cathartic and maybe justified, it highlights the critical importance of confronting the core wound. Healing from emotional neglect requires self-awareness and a willingness to work through the root of the trauma, not just its symptoms. So without this, the cycle of pain continues, manifesting in ways that can harm both the individual and those around them. The last little thing I'm going to talk about is because a lot of people don't know what fawning is, and it's really common and people should know about it more, but it's when you think of a danger response, you think fight, flight, freeze, and that's it. But there's another one that's called fawn. So essentially another component to Laura's behavior in Your Monster that I don't think is talked about enough in general is that Laura fawns a ton. Most people are familiar with, as I said, the typical ones, but the fourth one is often overlooked. So fawning is a trauma response where individuals cope by people-pleasing, over-compliance, and prioritizing other people's needs over their own well-being. It's common in femme-presenting individuals and those with autism, and often develops as a survival mechanism in response to childhood neglect, abuse, or other adverse experiences. Fawning is not just a conscious choice, it's a deeply ingrained and automatic behavior rooted in the need for safety and validation. Throughout the film, Lara fawns almost constantly. She bends over backwards to avoid conflict, choosing harmony over her own needs time and time again. It takes immense pressure and heartbreak for her to finally confront how poorly she's been treated and admit to herself that that wasn't okay. Like, there's like a long scene where he just says it over and over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. It wasn't okay. And then she finally says it back, and it's like this big, like,
release.
Yeah, like, none of what I've experienced is okay. Like, maybe he doesn't need to be murdered, but he definitely doesn't deserve my love. Because he clearly never
any excuses either.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, her basically placating him and, like, allowing him to behave how he was behaving towards her, even after leaving her while she was her most vulnerable state, is very much a fawn response. So her lack of self-awareness is striking, but it's also understandable. Growing up, it wasn't safe for her to be self-aware. The origins of fawning lie in trauma and fear. For many, especially femme individuals, fawning can even be a matter of survival, because in a world where saying no to the wrong man can provoke violence, prioritizing others can seem like the safest option. Over time, this coping mechanism becomes second nature, driving people to suppress their emotions, ignore their needs, and focus entirely on keeping the peace. Lara's fawning behavior is how her monster became closeted in the first place. She buried her needs and emotions so deeply that they practically disappeared. She shrunk herself, as Gabe was saying, to fit the lives of those around her. When we finally see her express her anger, tell people off, it's exhilarating, but it's bittersweet too, because the tragedy lies in what happens after. Lara doesn't get a happy ending. Instead, she's left facing life in jail or a mental institution. And while her rage feels cathartic and honestly satisfying, he sucked, it's hard to imagine what could have been. Like, if Lara were real as like an empathy thing, we would hope for something different. We'd want her to find freedom that she was denied, freedom from the toxic relationships, freedom to heal, and freedom to love herself. And it's heartbreaking, to be real, to think that she might never get that, even though she's a movie character. Like, if we're bringing Lara into real life, she deserved more than that, she deserved a life where she could thrive. But the tension between justice and sorrow is part of what makes your monster so powerful. And while we cheer for Lara's moments of honesty and rage, there's an underlying sadness to the freedom she'll never have. It's a brilliant ending to the film, though. It just makes me a little sad, 'cause, like, from an empathy standpoint, I'm like, I want you to win, Lara. Like, you finally figured out how to be rage, I'm sorry, Lara. I want better for you.
Yeah, it made me think of when we covered Invisible Man, and like being like there was a lot of brilliance in that film. Like, there was really ingenious camera angles and approach to abuse and like in toxic relationships in that way. It was the ending that really took us out of it, because like, even though it's a horror movie and all of that, like, that's not justice that it generally leads to the results that we want, leads to freedom and to finally recovering and healing. It leads to incarceration. It could lead to the death penalty. It could lead to you being harmed in a different way. So when we see like those revenge tales, and though this one isn't really explicitly that, because that's not what she wasn't like waiting to do that the whole time.
No.
It just kind of was like, this is just really clearly she blew up, it came to a tipping point and she's had enough, because the last thing that she had and was holding on to just broke, right? Like, how little she mattered to the people who mattered the most to her, just absolutely destroyed her. And so I agree, it's just like very emotional, and like, you feel for her, and even in that moment when she is, saying it's not fair and she's screaming and she's letting that out, that's just the one part of it. Like, the whole time you're like just wishing she told him off, and she never does. She never does. Like, because her response is she just kills him. She doesn't say like, you were a piece of shit. You were actually a terrible person for X, Y, and Z, and for treating me the way you have all the way until today. Like, never once changing or ever thinking of me as a person and treating me that way.
Like, I guess she like kind of does that one time, but then they also like hook up, so it's like, it kind of took away the weight of it a little bit, because then it's like he still wins. I don't know.
Well, still, especially because he knows that she got it wrong. He doesn't fix it. He doesn't like clarify it and like show her. He uses like her weakness for him to not like, it doesn't get through. And I will say, like, I think there's, for people who are people pleasers or people who've had traumatic or just, you know, these awful situations with people, and you really, there are parts of you that will always hold out hope for them coming around and apologizing genuinely and feeling bad and understanding and saying, you're right, I'm wrong, I messed up, I was horrible, and I did this to you. Like, you there's always a part of you that hopes for that, right? And I think healing is moving to a point where you don't need that, where you can still grow and you're not relying on this person to become a different person and to act in a way that is completely different from how they've ever acted. And so I think, if she could take more time, if her monster was just a little less like violent. I like, honestly, like him breaking his arm, I was like, heck yeah.
I feel like we could have left it there. I was like, that's like, that's consequenceless violence. You know, he didn't know that she was the one who did it, you know? During
a time, like, you know, like, it wasn't infidelity, but it was, you know, it was clear what was actually occurring. But like, and also like the way that he was holding that over even Jackie, like he was very much a villain in a lot of this. And so, I think it does just represent, like, there's at times where we hold out that we wish that if that conversation she had in the office, instead of him kissing her, if he instead was like, you know what, absolutely, you're right. That would have changed the whole story. But you're not going to get that. Instead, you're going to get him doing what he does. And manipulating her the way that he's very skilled at. So it is an infuriating film in some points. Because like I said, you're yelling, you're like, grow a backbone. I was so mad at her. But I get it. Like,
and you're like, it's so real though. That's why I'm like, I think it was necessary, but also it was really enraging. I think that was maybe, I don't know, part of the point. Because you're like, I am angry at her and also for her. I want better from both of you. And maybe not murder, but like, you know, happiness. And like, I think that's good advice what you said, Gabe, where like, you're not going to get the apology most of the time. So you need to heal without it. And that's how you can move past, and also like learn to like accept people for who they are and see them for who they actually are. Like that could be I don't need them in my life anymore, because clearly they don't care. They don't need to apologize to me. My absence is the consequence. So.
It's just thinking of like, what is envision a future where you don't need that, right? How can you keep going? Like, how can you know that you wake up in the morning and you feel okay? And you didn't get that. And so, and then work towards that, right? Because like, we can't control other people. We can't change their mind as much as we'd like to. And we can absolutely be upset and angry and wish them a cruel and painful death. But we don't have to bring them that death. We can just leave. So I think like, the justice would have been her performing that song, and even though he yelled at her, like the curtain has to go back up and she's the one in costume, and so she performs that song and she does an amazing job, and the people from the New York Times or whatever write about her. That like, and not in this way, which is what they're going to be writing about. That she murdered him before in the mid performance. So like the ending I'm envisioning in my head, my alternate ending, is she gets out, she's fine, she's actually a star. I'm a star.
She gets all like the credit that she finally deserves. But like, I get why they did the ending. Like, I'm not mad at the ending. I want to clarify that. Like, I thought it served like a really good it really showcases unresolved rage and trauma, and how that can really harm yourself and your relationships, even ones that, like, you know, they kind of deserve to be harmed, even if not murdered. It was very accurate. And entertaining. It was just sad.
Yeah. And I think, like, that's what film is for. So we can live out those fantasies. So we can put, like, insert face over to his face. And we get our justice wherever the person is, like, whatever apology you were waiting for. Maybe that's who we're seeing being murdered, and we can just maybe feel a little better, because in this world that's not real, it happens.
Fantasy world.
Free of consequence. It fades to black before we ever see anything bad. Right?
Yeah.
That's what horror is for. It's a cathartic release. We get to win. In a very, like, intense, like, to the 10th, you know, degree. And I think that's what's beautiful about this. And
we're thankful they made a movie instead of murder.
always make a movie, don't murder. Make a movie instead.
I've never done that laugh before. That was crazy. Did you hear that? It was, like, really high-pitched and weird. Fun.
So let us know what you think about your monster. Tell us about your monster, right? You know, how do you cope with those things? I will say, you know, Kat, I'm really thankful for your section, because I'm definitely a fawner. Like, as you were saying those things, I was like, oh, there's definitely instances where that is my gut response. Like, in awkward situations, uncomfortable, stressful, like, some form of intimidation happening, I'm immediately like, oh no, it's totally fine. Don't worry. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for telling me. That's so wonderful. I hope you have a good day. Do you want a hug? And then I leave. I turn around the next day. I'm like, why did I do that? Why wasn't I mad? Why wasn't I, like, angry? And I kick myself, you know? Like, there's still things I think back, like, what a ridiculous way to respond to something so horrific, you know? But it is a survival tactic, right? Like, to please, to earn your keep as well, especially when it comes to neglect. This is all is right there. It's gonna call my therapist, tell her all about it.
Definitely, I highly recommend, honestly, because same, I was like, oh, this finally gives me an excuse to talk about this, because I've been sitting on my hands for this one for a long time. I've, like, wanted to talk to him about fawning for a long time, because, like, it is very common, and it's honestly, like, at the detriment of the relationship you're in too, because you're not telling them how you really feel. And I have ruined relationships genuinely, like, where I'm like, oh, I really should have just been honest that it upset me, instead of it festering inside of me, because it harms the relationship long term, because then they can't get better or heal. Like, some people will apologize, and some people aren't pieces of crap, and like will rise to the occasion, and then you're, like, stealing their ability to do that. My therapist would yell at me all the time for that. They're like, you're assuming that they wouldn't listen to you, and that's not fair, because you love them, and you should let them rise to the occasion and prove that they do care about you and would respect your needs and boundaries. And I'm like, what do you mean?
I'm not worthy.
I know you're right, but also, like, I don't deserve it.
Also, like, shut up. Okay, who asked you?
I'm like, I hate that you said that, but also I love that you said that. I needed to hear that, but I wish you didn't.
I wish she went to therapy. I wish she had a better friend. At least, like, I wish she had just one person, not monster, person in her corner. And she gets that in the end. Like, Jackie just definitely comes to her, but it's a little too late. So I wish she had someone in her corner who could have just been like, girl, let's talk this through. And I hope, like, that you have a person that you can rely on, or you go to therapy or work through it. It is tough. It is a tough thing. Like I said, the Scorpio and me, we keep everything real cool, calm, and collected until it's not cool, calm, and collected anymore immediately. So let it all out, and then it's done, and then we can move on. And then I'm like, what do you mean? Get over it. I was mean for a minute. That's a Latina. No, I'm kidding.
They got overstimulated. I'm sorry.
This has happened 3 other times. You didn't know that, but it's happened 3 other times, and I know that because I've kept it in my brain.
Haunts me.
So, Yeah, make the stories, dude. Make the stories like this that are so relatable and so fun. And cast the people that you should cast. And yeah, this is I think it's a sleeper. I think people really slept on this because it was, I mean, it was an oversaturated year of horror and just like interesting,
makes sense,
original, great films. So I'm not, totally don't blame me if you hadn't seen it. This is your call to do that. And just, again, let us know what you think. Let us know about your monster. Let us know if there's other films that you think fit into this category. If there's, films you want to see, that kind of thing. Remember to like and subscribe. Give us some support. We are quickly approaching 300 episodes. This is episode 397?
297.
297. Thank you. Episode 297. Yes.
We're so close.
And so it's happening. So make sure you're watching us and keeping track so that we can celebrate our 300th and then keep it on throughout the year. What's your favorite episode? Tell me about it.
Yeah.
And I can tell you all the female rage. Live. Yeah. Come see us at World Cafe Live if you're here in Philly or travel to Philly. April 10th. You gotta do. April 10th. And yeah, that information will be on social media. And we are happy to share other feminine rage episodes that we've done. It's a favorite in the horror genre. Ladies be angry.
It's true.
And they be feeling about it. The whole subgenres about you pissed this lady off.
Yeah.
Right.
We don't get to kill in real life enough, so
that's why we play video games.
Yeah. That's true.
Our video games are we farm or we
we're
in The Sims and you either do what I said or your house is on fire, okay? You're drowning in the pool.
No doors. What are doors? Slowly start for the
stairs. All right, don't get married.
Eat your kids.
And you better not, like, you love them. Do more than 30%, please. Like, it's such a 1950s ridiculous thing to say.
Yeah.
Abuse.
And I'm sure, like, you definitely need more than 30%, but, like, I get it. Parenting's hard. The intent was good. It's just
you can like, I think you don't even understand what 30% is. Like, you can do more than 30% just by loving them. Genuinely. Listen to them. Treat them like people.
Yeah.
Bam. How do
it's
you want to be
way more
treated?
than just, like, house, clothe, and feed. They need, like, emotional support and love. They need love.
All you need is love.
We get it. It's hard out here.
And everything else. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see you on our 300th episode and the episodes in between that. So bye.
Bye.